by now, we should have a unique system. After 2009, when we entered the crisis and we had to establish AMCON, we would have thought that by now we would have, developed perhaps a more robust system to, see certain situations, assets or projects that be a lot riskier than some other projects, perhaps people who have owed in the past and are likely to owe again, or the kinds of things that caused us to have the kind of crisis we had in 2009. Not so soon. Quite a number of people think that we'll be publishing names again of bad debtors. Do you think that we're learning anything at all?
I think we are. And I believe that the central bank's body language for pushing this is probably because they don't want us to land in the same situation as we had before, that AMCON had to be created. It was an aberration. And for central bank to go through the same process again may show that we've not ever learned anything. So in order to preempt that, perhaps, that's why central bank is insisting that certain drastic actions has to be taken at this point.
You were talking about the role of collateral.
Yes.
You're trying to explain what role. Isn't it time? I mean, if these people really had collateral that they put forward to the banks, shouldn't the banks be looking at how much value or of how much value those collaterals will be by now?
Yeah, it's not that those collaterals are necessarily valueless now, or their value had reduced. They are still there. But what I'm trying to say is that they are not supposed to be the primary source of repayment. The transaction itself, against which the loan was granted, was supposed to be self-liquidating rather than fall back on collateral. However, for you to accept a collateral, the value, even at that time, should be over and above the amount of loan, including the anticipated interest. But most times, depending on the nature of that collateral, well, perhaps if it's a landed property, for example, there is the general belief that the value keeps increasing. But if it is shares, stocks and shares, for example, it gyrates. And therefore, at that particular time, you want to liquidate the loan. With the proceeds of such, you might end up losing heavily.
But I'm just wondering, under what circumstance can a loan be written off as bad debt?
Well, if you notice the publications, these are particularly those loans that have gone past 1 year period unpaid after the term that was agreed. Under the prudential guidelines, I think the maximum is 1 year past due bills.
Wow.
That needed to be fully provisioned and, if you like, to borrow your language, written off. But being written off does not mean...
The other part is the fact that banks now, no dollar deposits in DOM accounts. They say that they took this dollar cash to CBN. CBN was not accepting them, so they in turn won't accept them from customers, and the whole thing is stuck. So is this policy going to perhaps achieve, I don't know what intention really, but they say it's also having its impact. The Naira seems to be stabilizing.
Yeah, I think in the short run, it's like a fire dousing attempt at the exchange rate negative direction, which it was going. And I believe the reason, one of the reasons that the banks were not accepting foreign exchange deposits, that it has carrying costs. And where you don't have sufficient or equivalent outlets to use those funds, you bear the brunt as the bank, the depository, to carry the cost of doing that business. Because the restriction had been made against bank holdings, there's a limit, overnight limits and periodical limits to which you can hold. Once you are in excess of that, then there are issues with central banks. So for that reason, no banks want to run foul of the stipulation of central bank, but particularly you don't want to accumulate more costs to yourself by holding on to what you cannot dispose of.
Well, many have said that we have this financial laws in the country that regulate the DOM account, and so this policy, it seems as though it's going to unilaterally just superimpose itself upon that previous existing law, and so many think that, look, that shouldn't even be in the first instance.
Within every law, there are rules and regulations, and because nothing is actually cast in stone, you have to measure the success of policies on day-to-day basis and then adjust. I will consider this as an adjustment, not that it's actually changing the rule, whether unilaterally or collectively.
But do you think it's achieving its desired aim?
It depends on who is asking that question. For example, if I were in central bank, I would say yes, it's achieving it, because as you have seen, the Naira rate had been strengthened.
What about those who genuinely want to do business? Because the impression that people have now is if you're going to deposit dollars in the banks, they think you're a money launderer. And they say, look, nobody wants that kind of tag. And so it's impacting on genuine business people who want to do business with the dollar.
Unfortunately, you can't have it both ways. It's either your policy works or it doesn't work. You can never have a regulation or rule that the benefit will apply equally to both sides. Some people will be disappointed.
But
some people will be...
policies are supposed to, of course, work to the interest of the economy and those who are doing business.
Yeah, overall economy.
Exactly.
The overall economy. But how do you maintain the balance? I think the central bank is in a better position to actually tell us whether it's achieving its purpose or not. But from the layman's point of view, the only signal is what is the exchange rate last week, what is it today?
Is that a good,
and that is
a good yardstick?
Well, central bank is set up mainly to monitor prices, exchange rates, interest rates, monetary policy generally. So for them, it's the end result that really matters. Whether
explain to us, though, how does it work? Why is it that this particular policy of the central bank has sent rates plunging? I mean, has sent the Naira, well, the dollar is depreciating at least against the Naira. It's strengthened the Naira. How is it working?
As the objective is to strengthen the Naira, or at least control the free fall that we were going through before. The restrictions, I would say, is working, because you can no longer bring in those things that were considered frivolous into the economy.
Whereas these are things... Restricting them to access forex.
Yes, by restricting them. So the demand pool came down. And that's a question of the end justifies the means.
Oh, that was the first. You're talking about the 41 items that were restricted initially.
Yes.
Then, quite a number of people say that they didn't quite see the effect of that on the Naira. It's only after the CBN said it wasn't going to be taking dollar deposits from banks that we now saw it would seem that the Naira was able to stabilize somewhat. What exactly was the idea behind that adjustment, as you called it?
Yeah, the idea is to strengthen the Naira or control the fall that we are witnessing. But having said that, it is important to note that this activity, none of it can be a press button affair. So when people say we haven't seen the benefit of the previous policy of the banning of items, and so it takes time, because generally import takes a period of about 3 months from inception to when you receive them. So even when you say no more of these products, there are some that are already on the seas or are being cleared or in transportation system and so on, which still had to be paid for. So for that reason, you are not likely to have an immediate effect. You still see those items as if they were freshly brought in. But we're saying that things may change. In 3 months' time, we may not begin to see all those same items again in the same quantity that we used to see.
That's for the 41 items.
Yes.
But for this policy about not accepting dollars, how does it work?
I think it's a means of controlling the obligation to keep buying dollars. Because if there is no way you can pump it into other things, then the demand falls. So, and that is the objective. So the price will now reflect the policy that has been introduced. It means it's becoming effective. We may not like it, but that is the end result.
Is that the way that it's supposed to make the naira more valuable?
Well, to the extent that you spend less naira to chase dollars, then you can say naira becomes more valuable.
But we understand that the businessmen are diverting their businesses to neighboring countries who are in turn gladly receiving all of those foreign exchange.
Yeah, unfortunately, that will be the effect in the short term. But I think there's a limit to which that will continue to happen.
In the long term, what will happen? If that's the effects in the short term, what do you see happening in the long term?
Okay, that's my personal fear, that all this, how long will this firefighting approach last? Particularly because we are monolithic as far as our economy base is concerned. We've been crying over this for many years, that we should diversify our income base and foreign exchange flow base, but that's not yet in the horizon, I'm afraid.
The question some would ask will be that, do you think the CBN is somewhat overwhelmed?
How?
So many issues here and there: monetary policy, interest rates, investments, inflow, and corruption.
Well, that's another field entirely. But central bank is there basically to manage these monetary policies on day-to-day basis. I don't see how central banks should become overwhelmed.
No, you used a statement that made me ask the question. You said this firefighting approach.
Yes, that's what it is, of
Obvious.
course. Yes. And you need to keep fighting the fire anyway, because there will always be fire.
Is it possible to prevent the fire?
Yes.
All right, we got to go. Unfortunately, but thank you for coming on. Mr. Esan Ogunleye is a banking consultant and former registrar and CEO of Chartered Institute of Bankers in Nigeria. We'll be back in just a moment. Don't go away.